In this video we're going to be looking at what's meant by comparative advantage and how to calculate comparative advantage, and looking at some avoidable and unavoidable trade barriers. Comparative advantage refers to the ability of a country to produce a particular good at a lower opportunity cost. So basically we sacrifice less to produce a particular good or service than another country. Even if one country is more efficient in the production of all goods, in other words, they have an absolute advantage. Absolute advantage just means they're better and more efficient at producing a certain product. They can still benefit from trade as long as one of them has, they both have comparative advantage in one particular product. So here's an example of two countries. You've got country A and country B. Country A, if they split their time evenly, can either produce 100 cars or 100 rice. And country B, 50 or 200. Basically, to work out the opportunity cost, you use the other method. So if we want to work out the opportunity cost for country A of producing an extra car, you do 100 rice divided by 100 cars. So the opportunity cost is 1, and then the other way is 1 as well. If you want to work out the opportunity cost for country B of producing a car, you do 200, so the other one, divided by this one. So the opportunity cost from country B of making another car is equal to 4. They have to give up 4 units of rice every time they make an extra car. And the opportunity cost of producing rice would be 50 divided by 200, or 1/4. So if these two countries were to trade and specialise in trade, country A would specialise in cars because they have a lower opportunity cost, and country B would specialise in rice. That's how opportunity cost works. Another example here with fish and mangoes that I went through in class. Steph is better at both. She has absolute advantage in both, but she doesn't necessarily have comparative advantage in both. Even though Vicky's not very good at either, she has comparative advantage in one particular product. So if there's no trade, Steph can produce 5 of each, Vicky can produce 2 fish and 4 mangoes. If they specialise, well, they want to specialise in where they have comparative advantage. So for Steph, their opportunity cost of a fish is 1 mango, and their opportunity cost of a mango is 1 fish. For Vicky, if she wants to produce a fish, she has to give up 2 mangoes, 4 divided by 2. And for Vicky to produce mango, she only has to give up half a fish. Because she's quicker at producing mangoes than fish. So basically what ends up happening is, because Steph's got comparative advantage in fish and Vicky's got comparative advantage in mangoes, Steph produces mainly fish and Vicky produces mainly mangoes, and they trade to become better off. This is the example I gave you in class. Which of the following statements is true? Bolzolio has an absolute advantage in the production of computers. Because she's more efficient, he can produce 1,000 computers a day. Wilconio can only produce 700. Bolzolio is the more efficient country. According to the theory of comparative advantage, what is the most efficient way to structure trade in cars and computers? Again, you do it based on the lower lower opportunity cost. So for Wilconio to produce a car, they have to give up over the other one over this one, so it'd be 7 on 5, and the other one is just 1. For Wilconio to produce computers, they have to give up 500 divided by 700, which is 5 on 7. And the other one is 1. So who has opportunity cost in who has comparative advantage in cars? Bolzolio. Who has comparative advantage in computers? Wilconio. So that's what they'll focus on, and the answer would be B. Bolzolio would make most of the cars, and Wilconio would allocate most to the computers. The other part of this topic is looking at protection versus free trade. In the past, Australia has tried to protect our local imports via things like tariffs and quotas and things like that. In recent times, we've started to reduce our level of protection. So there is what we call unavoidable and avoidable trade barriers. Our unavoidable trade barriers are essentially things that we can't avoid. That would include transportation, so it's very hard for us to transport goods to countries that are a long way away, and some products have expiry dates, which makes it very hard to trade across national borders because things can go off. There's also 6 avoidable trade barriers: tariffs, quotas, subsidies, local content rules, parallel import restrictions, and preferential treatment. You can see in Australia, tariffs have gone down considerably over the last 25 years, particularly in the motor vehicle industry and textiles and clothing and footwear, so these 2 lines that are going like this. Generally, they weren't as high in the past, but they have still gone down considerably. Tariffs are taxes on imports. They put a tax on a product as a certain percentage of the import value, and it reduces demand for imports and increases demand for Australian products. Higher tariffs can often help employment in the short term because it keeps jobs in Australia because we import less, but in the long term we become less efficient and it can be bad for keeping jobs in Australia. Quotas are a limit on the number of products that can come into a country. So unlike a tariff, they're not a tax, they're just a limit on the total amount that we can import from another country. Because there's a limit on supply, what can also happen is because essentially like China might only be able to import say 10 PlayStations to Australia, because demand would outweigh supply in Australia, the price is likely to go up. Subsidies are financial assistance for local producers. They lead to lower prices for Australian products and therefore help to protect jobs in Australia. The only problem with subsidies is they cost the government money, so they may have to increase taxes. Legal obstacles is another one, like steering wheels on the wrong side makes it hard for us to import products. Local content rules is a harder one. That's basically saying that a certain amount of goods and services produced in Australia must contain local Australian content. So there's rules from the government that basically, particularly with TV, that they have to have a certain amount of their content that's Australian owned. It's about 55% for free-to-air channels. So local TV shows must have a certain amount of local content to keep jobs within Australia and protect Australian industries. And the last two, parallel import restrictions. They're a way to prevent foreign businesses from producing and selling goods in Australia that are protected by copyright laws. So it kind of like prevents foreign books from getting published in Australia, particularly when there's Australian books that are very similar to those products. The idea is to try and create innovation and, I suppose, development in Australia's book industry, so we don't have to compete with foreign products. And preferential treatment is the last one. That's when we give local producers a better chance of getting contracts from the government. So if the government's building a road, for example, they might give the Australians preferential treatment, the Australian company. Even if they're a little bit more expensive, they go with the Australian product, or sorry, Australian company because they're cheaper. Thank you.